So you've been looking at the best players. What's the criteria here?
That's a great question, Jared. I was sitting down last night thinking that myself. What is the criteria here? It's obviously there's a little mix of talent. There's a little bit of what they've done this season, and there's a bit of players the team should be looking at to sign, whether in January, which is probably unlikely for most, or the coming summer.
Top 10 outside the top 10. Top 10 outside the top 10 clubs. Top 10 outside the top 10 players.
Top 10 clubs. So, your Brightons and your Wolves, they're in that top 10 at the moment. They don't get in here. Well, Villa are outside the top 10, Ger.
All right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's very true.
It's true.
See yourselves as a big club, but still outside the top 10.
I mean, this week. So when was the cutoff point? It was this week, was it? It's
yesterday.
Right now. Okay.
Right now.
So Leicester City, no players in this because they're 10th.
No, exactly.
Villa are
outside
11th. The
top 10.
Villa are 11th on one. They've conceded one goal more.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough. You
got to have a criteria.
Well, that's what I was asking. What the criteria are, and
I can't believe we've made a black and white thing a debate on this show.
The one black and white bit I had was outside the top 10.
Okay, let's go for it. Let's go for it.
I'm a bit concerned now because if you're getting confused by the outside the top 10, it's only going to go downhill from here.
All right. Okay. Come on.
Number 10, Ger. In a 10. Are we doing a ranking? Or do you just want the 10 or do you want them 10 to 1?
No, 10 to 1 because you've obviously done a 10 to 1.
Yeah. 10 to 1. I'm going with Eberechi Eze, who is maybe the most skillful player, or right up there in the teams outside the top 10. He obviously had a horrible injury at the end of last season, but he's just full of trickery. He's full of mischief. He's full of intent. He's still very young. He's only 23. And he's getting himself back into the Crystal Palace side. Every time you watch him, you think, old school, sort of runs with the ball, constantly tries to do the right thing, constantly tries to create something. In a Palace team that at times could be overshadowed by Wilf Zaha, but he is a really easy, natural successor for Wilf Zaha. But I think in modern football, where people want to be entertained, and you just have to look at Crystal Palace and how much their fans are enjoying life under Patrick Vieira compared to Roy Hodgson, I think a lot of teams will want Eberechi Eze. What he needs to do to push himself up this list is to probably start adding a few more goals. Like, the injury was a big setback. He only scored 4 last season, a lot of appearances off the bench. But if he can suddenly become a player who scores even 10 goals a season, he is going to be going right to the very, very top.
He's actually 23, so he's not a kid.
No, he's not. He's not bursting onto the scene at 18, 19. He had a good few seasons at QPR and did score a lot of goals in the Championship in his last season there, got well into double figures, so he does have that sort of potential. And the injury was a huge setback because I think it looked like he was comfortable in the Premier League for the last few months of last season, did his Achilles, ends up missing 6 months. It's sort of been easing him back in over the last few weeks. There's been a bit of speculation about Wilfried Zaha's future over the last few weeks, which would automatically means he has a straightforward spot on that really exciting Crystal Palace team. So I think next season, Eberechi Eze and the latter half of this season is somebody you're going to get really excited about.
Okay. Who's at 9?
Ilham Melier. 21, maybe the best young goalkeeper in the Premier League right now. Has had a tough season at Leeds.
Owen hates him.
Behind. I heard this, and one of the reasons why I made sure.
Owen despises.
I feel like I'm being indirected here.
He thinks he's the worst goalkeeper
you can tag me in the tweet, Nathan. It's okay.
I'm fine. I've no problem doing it. I think again you're looking at a player at 21 who plays a thoroughly modern style of football for a goalkeeper, really comfortable with the ball at his feet, makes a lot of good saves. He just has, he does have a face that you wouldn't really trust. And I can understand Owen's dislike for him because of that.
He's even more boyish than him. That's what it is. It's jealousy.
Well, exactly.
Jealousy.
He makes me look old.
The French international goalkeeper in the next couple of years. I could not understand Owen's criticism of him a few weeks back at all. Like, it's a tough gig being the Leeds goalkeeper at the moment when they're constantly
I said sorry, Nathan.
Defenders. Did you at the end of it?
I think I did. I think I accepted I was wrong, to be honest. I didn't.
So I think he will be one that a lot of those top teams will be looking at, maybe even a Paris Saint-Germain in a few years will be looking at. They signed Donnarumma, obviously, but that the very top teams will be looking at over the next 2 or 3 years as somebody who could be their goalkeeper for a long, long time. And even this season, as Leeds have struggled, so he makes some brilliant saves. And his distribution is top class.
I know that Phil has been constantly reminding me of what I said about Illan Melier a couple of weeks ago, and has given me constant updates, having watched all 90 minutes of all Leeds' games since then, on any little error he makes, because it feels that I'm in on the ground level of Illan Melier being a flop one day. But I apologise for that. I just don't think that's the case. I think that conversation started around Caoimhín Kelleher. I don't want to get off track too much here, but Caoimhín Kelleher, Illan Melier, are they on similar trajectories when you're talking about Melier in those glowing terms?
Well, Melier has played an awful lot more games.
Yeah, he's ahead of him, isn't he?
Which means he is ahead of Caoimhín Kelleher. They actually have a similar look and stance. They both feel quite lanky, maybe because they haven't quite filled out, because they're still very young players. So, like, Melier is up on 120 games between Lorient and Leeds. So Caoimhín Kelleher just needs to get that time under his belt. And yeah, Caoimhín Kelleher is going to be stepping down no matter where he goes from Liverpool, if he does go over the next 2 or 3 years, whereas Illan Melier is only going to be going up. Maybe to meet somewhere in the middle.
Melier is 5 centimetres taller than Caoimhín Kelleher, according to
what?
it. Yeah.
Caoimhín Kelleher's only 6 foot.
5 centimetres. Kelleher's 188.
Okay.
It says.
I like to work in inches when we're talking goalkeepers, Ger.
I know, yeah, but ayo.
He's 6'2" is Caoimhín Kelleher.
Okay. Yeah. So 3 inches is 5 centimetres.
There you go. It's good. This is a show where we learn things. We move on to number 8.
Yeah, right there.
Keep going, Nathan.
Number 8. I'm going for Dwight Mcneil of Burnley. Somewhat overshadowed by Maxwell Cornet this season. Another great left-sided player alerted me to the potential of Dwight Mcneil a couple of years ago. Kevin Kilbane was a very big fan. I was never quite convinced, but I've started watching him quite closely since.
Oh, Kevin knows more about football than you do. Oh, what a shock.
I wouldn't say that. He spotted one player that one time.
His 175 million caps would... Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Go on. Listen, he hasn't done a huge amount this season in a Burnley side that, haven't played in about 6 months, but when he gets on the ball, he just oozes quality. Burnley don't have a lot of possession. He can slow it down. He can play things at his own pace. He can pick out a pass. And I was surprised he's still only 22. It feels like he's been around for a long time. He barely missed a game over the last 3 years. Type of player you think, again, could fit into one of those top 4, top 5 sides. I've seen him linked with, an Everton, maybe even an Aston Villa. I don't know if he's because you're going to end up spending 35-40 million on him in all likelihood.
Is it that price? Yeah.
And when that happens,
because he's English,
because he's young, because he's played a lot of games, and he's probably worth that. But if you spend that and you're going to an Everton or a Villa, everyone expects you to come and score 8-10 goals a season, to be the creator, to be the dynamic one. And maybe he is that on the better side under a different type of manager to a Sean Dyche, where actually I think his style of play would fit in perfectly with a real top quality side where they have a lot of possession and he can fit into that. So there's even been talk that he could go in this transfer window. I can't imagine Burnley will let somebody else go with Chris Wood. They've obviously got massive financial issues at the moment, but Dwight Mcneil I would expect will go to a team inside the top 10 and will not be able to make this list, next season.
Fair enough. Or else he joins Everton and he's on the list as one of our number 1s next season. Go on, what's next?
Right, exactly. Here's a guy who I actually would have had if we were doing the top players outside the top 6 last season, I would have had this guy as number 1. Richarlison, who I think was killed by Brazil during the summer, was the main issue for Richarlison, because they played him at the Olympics and then they played him in the Copa America. He played the full season, barely missing a game for Everton. He played probably 65 matches over the course of 12 months with no break coming into the season. And he's been really flat as part of a pretty brutal Everton team this season. But the previous 2-3 years, I just thought he got better and better. There is obviously a bit of a stereotype about Brazilian players, particularly attacking Brazilian players, a player and all of that. I actually find Richarlison works incredibly hard, and when he was out on the right hand side for Everton in front of Seamus Coleman, they had a really good partnership over there. He can score goals, he's a bit of a nuisance, he's got a bit of trickery. So I think if Everton and a new manager can get Richarlison back playing, I think again he's a player who can deliver an awful lot for I was going to say a very good team, a top team. I know they get very upset at Everton if you don't talk about them in the right way, but he's unquestionably had a big dip this year. But I think Richarlison is top class.
Bit of a bargain basement option, relatively speaking, for teams this summer, where you buy a player in bad form, but you know that his ceiling is quite high.
Well, you see, the problem for Richarlison is they spent 40 million on him. So Is he a better player now than when he arrived? You'd have to say he is. His reputation has been enhanced. He's had 3-4 years in the Premier League, scored a lot of goals. So maybe 40 million is bargain basement. Maybe they're happy to move him on and the manager's trying to change the club completely. But if he gets any sort of form going, you probably are looking at somebody who's a sort of 60, 70 million. So I'm not quite sure you'll get Richarlison in that sort of bargain basement. And again, quite young for the amount of games that he has played. So I think Richarlison, I've always liked Richarlison since the first couple of seasons he's there.
Yeah,
and he's let me down badly this year.
He has. I remember you were like, oh, Richarlison, 80-1, he's going to be the top scorer. And then Calvert-Lewin, 80-1, actually was in the running to be top scorer, but Nathan didn't tip that on our show. Anyway, Richarlison's only 24, so yeah, you can see how they would be hopeful that a little uptick in form over the last few months of this year, and they will get 60-70 million for him in the summer, and that's money that they could properly reinvest. But or else you try and build around him. Is he the type of player you just knuckle down and say, right, you're going to be one of our creative players, you and Calvert-Lewin are actually enough for us to be a top 10 team, and then if we layer in some reasonable recruitment, it doesn't have to be sensational recruitment, reasonable recruitment.
Well, I assume that has been the plan at Everton for the last 2 or 3 seasons, has been to just add a player of a certain quality in around Richarlison and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and it's never happened. Like, how many number 10s have they tried to buy over the last 4 or 5 years, and none of them have been able to create enough for them. And also, I guess with Everton, that new stadium is underway. They're going to be in there maybe 2024. Are you going to sell your best players between now and then? Maybe you need to sell them to pay for it, but also you want to have those superstars there when you move in.
Yeah. Okay. So Richarlison is number 60?
7.
Number 7. Wow, this is going to go on all day, isn't it? Number 6, I'm going for Mark Getty. Crystal Palace, centre back, 21. There's going to be a couple of former Chelsea players or current Chelsea players, whatever way you want to look at it. Another one of these Chelsea guys who you sort of didn't hear a huge amount of, was never really near at the first team, spent last season out at loan at Swansea, and then during the summer you go, wait a second, Crystal Palace are spending 18 million quid on a guy I've barely heard of from Chelsea, but he's been outstanding. Looks like a player who's spent a lot of time at a top club's academy in terms of his comfort on the ball, and it was the perfect move at the right time, because I think if Mark Getty goes to Crystal Palace last year under Roy Hodgson, where they're playing backs to the wall football the whole time, that may not be his game. But in a Palace side that are constantly trying to play it out from the back now, that are playing that more modern style, that are trying to link it up between defence and midfield. Again, every time I've watched him, he's been brilliant. He looks tough as nails. And to be playing centre back every week in the Premier League at 21, I think shows his potential. Patrick Vieira obviously sees a lot in him. I assume Chelsea have some sort of a buyback clause there. Like, if you think Chelsea could have had Getty and Tomori as their centre-half partnership, even right now you would think, bloody hell, those two at 21, 22 will be as good as it gets. So they obviously are just overflowing with talent. We're willing to let this guy go, and he's been a brilliant signing for Crystal Palace. And don't be surprised if he ends up back at Chelsea at some stage over the next few years.
They need some sort of setup like Red Bull have Toro Rosso, where they can just have these kids and just see them develop and actually allow that partnership to develop and copy and paste it into the Chelsea team over a period of time, or maybe even more close to the point, like a Manchester City setup where they have a number of different clubs where they can control this a bit more than the situation that they're at the moment.
Yeah, you look at what Manchester City have done, similar things over the last couple of years with Jack Harrison, who ends up spending a lot of time out on loan, and eventually they're able to sell him for Leeds. What Chelsea are clearly looking at is, unless you are the absolute elite level who are going to fit into our squad, we're willing to let you go. Like 18 million, I'm sure, pays for your academy for the entire year, and Chelsea were able to sell 3 or 4 of those. You look at Borja at Southampton, Livermento going as well. Like, Borja I think's gone on loan, but they're 2 of the best young players around, again, who've come through that Chelsea system. They've been able to cash in on one of them for another 20 million. That is a nice little conveyor belt of cash coming in every single summer.
I'm pretty sure the Douglas Luiz deal with Villa had like a buyback, but it ran out after a period of time, and certainly there was rumours about it. Last summer would have been the last summer that they could have used and exercised that clause, and otherwise now they just have to pay the market price. Again, this stuff isn't published unless there's another football leaks, but Getty signed a 5-year deal with Palace. They never make public the fact that there's a buyback or otherwise. That kind of comes out at some point when, I guess, the player's agent is looking for a new contract, leaks at the parent club, wants to get the player back even though he's no longer the parent club, and that's why you get the new deal and some kind of backroom conversation is had and the buyback disappears. But like it's risky enough, because if this kid turns out to be as good as you say he is, that's a 40-50 million pound player, right? Young centre back at 24 who's played 200 Premier League matches. They're very, very rare.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see over the next few years how those deals go, because likewise with Tomori at AC Milan, there seems to be a split as to whether they have an option of bringing it back. And, well, maybe Chelsea aren't the geniuses we make them out to be when you look at what's going on with Emerson Palmieri at Lyon at the moment, who's on loan, and they're desperate for a left back. And even though he's on loan, they can't seem to find a way of being able to actually get him back from Lyon for the remainder of the season. But is there, as it seems to be the case with Declan Rice, is there an embarrassment factor at Chelsea in any way, bringing players back, having let them go? I'd like to think business-wise, there's not. That if you have that clause there, and maybe it's because Declan Rice went so young and that they're going to have to spend straight up.
Yeah, well, there was no De Bruyne, Salah. They didn't. Maybe they've learned from those. That's a long time ago, in fairness. But like, if you put those two in that Chelsea team, that's the great sliding doors moment of the Chelsea fans. Like, maybe if Jose hadn't got rid of those guys. Anyway, keep going.
John McGinn. Brian Kerr gave me an awful lot of hassle on the commentary last year for talking about John McGinn's arse. And then I felt a little bit bad about talking about the size of John McGinn's arse, because he clearly has, the finest, most well-stacked arse in all of football. But then I heard John McGinn recently talking about his arse and been, quite delighted with the impact his arse can make.
We're living in the era of the arse. People like arses a lot, it turns out.
Well, particularly John McGinn's, I think.
They're very trendy.
Villa.
Yeah.
It makes a big impact. Watching them this season, seems to be that proper driving force of that Villa midfield at the moment. I thought last season when I saw him that maybe when he came back from injury, he was carrying a little bit and struggled to get about, because his game is all energy, all intensity. They've got a lot of really good attacking quality players in that Villa side at the moment. But McGinn, even though he's probably maybe even the oldest player on this list, if you're a top 6 team and you're looking for a quality midfielder who can slot right in straight away and do a job, the Villa are a selling club, that they can be easily approached and wouldn't stand in the way of anyone's dreams. So I think Villa had a few players who could have ended up on this list. Ollie Watkins obviously has had a few injury problems. He was very, very close with it. I like Watkins. I know you're not fully convinced, I think, Ger, on Ollie Watkins.
We just need to add some more goals. That's it. Like, everything else is actually back to the level it was when he was scoring the goals, but it just needs to add that finishing, and that's not there at the moment.
Who you having if you're doing this list? Who you having from Villa?
Well, Ramsey. I mean, Ramsey's burst on the scene this year by getting loads of game time, and he's got game time because of injuries and has been absolutely sensational. Like the rest of those kids, Emi Martinez.
I was about to say Emi Martinez, and obviously to a lesser degree Buendia if he can come good, but right now you're not having him.
Buendia is coming good, and who knows? Maybe Coutinho is on this list at the end of the season.
Maybe Luka Dean's on this list by the end of the season.
Could
so much talent.
And I mean, if you're talking about
maybe Villa won't be able to be on this list by the end of the season.
Villa won't be on this list. There's not a hope Villa are on this list at the end of the season.
I was going to say Kieran Trippier could potentially be on this list come the end of the season. Just one thing on McGinn. I'm sure you'll remember the greatest piece of analysis during the Euros was Yaya Toure in The Athletic. He says if you look at a picture of McGinn, you can see he has very powerful legs and hips, and there are times when you could see him get the ball with his back to an England player, smell the danger was coming, and then use his bum to shield the ball from them. The bum is an important part, as it can create a moment of space between you and another player, so you have more time with the ball. So not just you, Nathan, Yaya Toure as well, hopping on the John McGinn arse bandwagon.
Big old bandwagon.
Big old bandwagon. Room for everybody.
Again, I go back to the point that United were linked with him, not necessarily just because of what he can do on the field, but because of the character. And it's clear that Manchester United have not enough character in the dressing room, that dressing room is just this weird FC Hollywood orgy of ego. And McGinn's going to walk in and have an impact on that. So if they get 60, 80 million for that, yeah, go for it.
Well, if you get 60, 80 million, absolutely you go for it. I think we probably spoke about Seamus Coleman in similar terms a couple of years ago at Manchester United. Was he the best right back in the world at the time they could sign? No. But actually, maybe he's the type of character you want in that dressing room.
Exactly.
The problem United have at the moment is that you look at them, and whatever team they're playing, you look at the opposition midfield and think, those two guys would be better than what Manchester United have at the moment. Every time I watch them play Wolves, I think, geez, if they'd signed Ruben Neves and João Moutinho 4 years ago, Manchester United would be in a very different world right now. So, yes, John McGinn, I think, could definitely go and do a job. An all-Scottish midfield with Scott McTominay. A beautiful thing. Number 4, he was in our half team of the season, so he's got to be on this list. Conor Gallagher, on loan from Chelsea. Again, will he go back in the summer, or will they sell him to Crystal Palace, or will other teams have looked at one of the best players in the season so far who can score a goal from midfield? The obvious comparison has been made with Frank Lampard and his ability to pop up in the right place at the right time. I think he is somebody who's going to be in and around the England squad very soon. He's, again, just somebody who, in a Palace side, in a perfect team for him, that plays the way that all those top 3 or 4 teams play, in the amount of possession that they like to get, in the amount of touches he gets on the ball. Yeah, Gallagher has been one of those success stories from Chelsea, and the amount of time he spent out on loan and season on season just seems to improve. And maybe there is a place for him in that Chelsea midfield next season. The other thing, if you're in Conor Gallagher's boots, and maybe it's out of your hands what Chelsea want to do, is probably look at the managerial situation and go, okay, I could leave. Thomas Tuchel may not want me right now, but actually somebody else is going to come in 6 months' time, and they may play a very different shape. They may not play 3 at the back. They may want more a different type of midfielder. You might want to go with a Jorginho on a Kante and me just in front to play Mason Mount somewhere else. So that may play in his mind as well.
All right, next.
Calvin Phillips. His absence this season, and for good chunks of it for Leeds, I think has been one of their main problems. The fact that they haven't had Phillips and Bamford has killed them for large parts of the season. But when you watch them trying to play it out from the back, and Calvin Phillips isn't there, like they play this 4-1-4-1 formation when they're at their very best, and he's the one who somehow has to knit it all together. They don't have anyone who can replace him at all, and I think his importance and his brilliance as a footballer has grown in his absence, that you really see what he can do. Range of passing, obviously has to press high and be intense. And what he's done with England as well, he's shown actually that he can do it at the very, very top level. So they'll...
the top level is the Champions League. We know that. Not international football.
Well, but
he's done it under pressure.
Available to him right now. This is going to be such an interesting summer at Leeds when they have 4 or 5 guys who could all go elsewhere. From Phillips, even a Bamford, who's not there, and Mcneil, the great Luke Ayling. Luke Ayling would never leave Leeds. But I think Calvin Phillips, in that central midfield position, again, is somebody who would massively improve in Manchester United. In fact, we could have just done this as the top players outside the top 10 who would improve Manchester United.
Well, that's all of them. So go on. Are we done? 2 more?
No, we still have 2 more, Ger.
We'll fly through them because we're miles behind, yeah.
Okay, I apologise for that. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, number 2. I see he's been strongly linked with Arsenal. I have to say, I was, as you mentioned, not fully expecting this turnaround from Dominic Calvert-Lewin over the last couple of years. Nobody has a better leap than Dominic Calvert-Lewin. There's no finer sight in football than Dominic Calvert-Lewin going up for a ball ahead of a big centre half, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin chesting it down in front of the centre half's head. He's added goals. I also thought Dominic Calvert-Lewin was going to be an 8-9 goal a year striker who'd nick in one here and there, but I just think he's brought his game to a whole other level over the last couple of seasons, and injuries have hampered him this season. They've massively hampered everything. They've built their team around him over the last couple of seasons, and I think if he gets back fit, he is more than capable of playing for an Arsenal or better and leading the line for Arsenal for the next few years. And number 1 on the list, unquestionably, I think the best player outside the top 10. Rafinha, again, similar to Richarlison, that sort of stereotype of the Brazilians. They do this, they don't do this. I think he does it all. You do not get in that Marcelo Bielsa side without working your ass off. He has the tricks, he has the creativity, he has the finishing power. He scored a load of goals this season in the team that's been struggling. And I would be shocked if he's still at Leeds for next season. He could go to Liverpool, who've been strongly linked. He could go to any of those top 3 or 4 teams. Fits in perfectly into what Bielsa's trying to do at the moment. Again, still one of those guys who's probably younger than you would think. He's got, 8 goals this season, 6 last season. He's just 25, so he's about to enter the peak of his career. Love watching him every time you see Leeds play, and he'd fit into a high press system. And if you're talking about replacements for Mo Salah, if he were to go, I think Rafinha would be near the top of that list.
All right, that's a list that I'm sure will be torn apart today on Twitter, no doubt. Nathan, thanks very much for that.